This week, we're continuing in our APOLOGIA message series. And does anybody remember either the Greek or Latin word that we use to name this series? Anybody? Apologia, there we go. See, the first one was super simple, okay? And it's from, thank you, Mike. I do appreciate that you track with me. All right, from that word, that's where we get the Christian discipline of apologetics, or the idea of making a defense for the faith. And we've looked through our memory verse and a few other things that this defense that we're talking about, the, kind of standing up for the faith, the Christian faith, is not about being argumentative. It's not about putting up your dukes and fighting it out. It is about being ready to display the beauty of the gospel and to have reasoned and reasonable responses when people ask us questions. That's actually what our memory verse for the series, which we'll get to at the end, the memory verse that we have says, be ready to make a defense when you're asked for the reason for the hope that is within you. It's not about going on the offensive and taking down all those who disagree. It's about living in such a way that the hope you have in Jesus is so wildly apparent to the world around you that despite the very real difficulties, sufferings, and tragedies that go on throughout the world, that you can navigate it with hope. You can navigate it with peace. And when people see it, they go, why? How? And that's where you can begin to say, and here's why this is a reasonable belief. It's all about Jesus. And so I've been trying to give us some ideas of how to think about apologetics. Last week, I gave you the definition from our seminary, our school for preparing pastors and missionaries and other Christian workers out in Indiana. They put out an article in February which talked about apologetics being more along the lines of finding this hidden, buried treasure and you being so excited that you want to tell your friend all about it, even if he has some doubts about it. You just want to convince him of how amazing and wonderful this treasure is. Well, this week I want to share a quote. This is from a doctor, Dr. Rebecca McLaughlin, I believe is how you pronounce her name, from Cambridge University. And in a book she wrote, Confronting Christianity, Hard Questions for the World's Largest Religion. And she is coming at this from the perspective of someone who follows Jesus. So when she's saying confronting Christianity, she's not writing a book to take it down. She's saying, hey, we have to be willing to ask these tough questions. She says, apologetics is not about winning an argument and losing a soul. It is about clearing away the intellectual brushwood so that someone can see the cross clearly. And I've said one of the most lamentable things about, especially in my view, what I see as modern apologetics, how people do this idea of apologetics today, is that they focus so much on being right and on winning the argument, about their gotcha moments, that they end up pushing people further away from Jesus, which is an absolute antithesis to what apologetics is supposed to be, which is to provide those reasoned and reasonable responses to someone who's questioning the hope that you have in Jesus. It's to help them come to the cross, not push them away. So for everything we're doing in this whole series, as we're looking at it and saying that, yes, there are absolutely reasonable, reasoned responses. So much so that I remain absolutely wholeheartedly convinced in the veracity, the truthfulness of them, that I continue to walk in faith towards Jesus. I believe the Bible confirms these things. I believe the Bible declares these things. And I think creation does the same, that it supports and walks in lockstep with the truth of Scripture when it comes to the reliability of knowing that God exists, of knowing that He has purpose for our lives, what we're going to talk about today, and then also that there is restoration available in a world of suffering. And that's where we're going to kind of step into next week. But this week, we're going to look at the big idea that God did design all things, and so all of life has purpose. And I would argue that the very existence of design demands that there is purpose. Design is not accidental, okay? You don't accidentally paint a picture, right? You can spill paint, but that's not a painting. The only way to have a painting is to have a painter who painted it, and in so doing, there was a purpose and a design behind it. So that design leads to purpose. And we're going to look at that. And this is what in kind of classical philosophical thought is called, now look for it, it's on your little booklets if you got them on your way in, it's up on the screens now, it's the fine-tuning of the cosmos, what's known as the teleological argument. How many of you before in your lives have used the word teleological? Anybody? Yep, not so much a common word. Last week, the cosmological, a few people were like, well, I kind of know what cosmos is, or cosmos. I think so. I think I got that. But teleological, this actually comes from two Greek words, telos and logos. Logos is study, reasoning, thinking, word, message. We've kind of worked with that before in our messages and how we've talked about it. It's a very common word in the New Testaments of our Greek. But telos is a little bit different. It's not one we run across a whole lot, and it's not one that has made its way over into the English language directly. The Greek word cosmos, we have cosmos. We have, across the cosmos, it's the universe, space, time. We have that word translated over to English. We don't have this with telos. This Greek word, the language of the New Testament, it has, it carries the meaning of an end or a goal or a purpose or intended outcome. So the idea of the teleological argument is the study of purpose. And so there's an argument from looking at purpose in the universe. And so here's basically how it goes. When the teleological argument is made, again, kind of we're looking at it in three steps. The first step is that the whole of the cosmos, what we looked at last week, that the fact that it does exist and its existence therefore means that there is something that caused the existence, the uncaused causer, the unmoved mover, that entity outside of everything else that we know that caused everything we know to exist. The whole of the cosmos displays order, complexity, and fine-tuning. And we cannot go through all of these arguments, but I want to suggest that this is one of those that science kind of explicitly is pointing out. What we're discovering from scientific endeavors, and as a side note, I find it rather comical that some of the conversations I have with those who do reject the faith or who would declare, hey, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, they'll say, because I believe in science. Do you know where all of scientific endeavor the world over has its origins in? In religion, and in particular, the Christian faith. Because what the Christian faith taught was that this creation was made with intelligence, purpose, and design, and therefore it is knowable. And in knowing creation, we can know the creator. So the very discipline that people say, I believe in this, not God, it has its roots in the fact that it was formed by people who knew who God was and pursued science because of that. And I believe that's what science continues to tell. This goes over and over and over. If you look at the evidence for the creation of life on planet Earth, there are certain amino acids that are essential for all life to exist. Life cannot exist without certain amino acids. Now, in anything that the theories perhaps of evolution put out, or a non-creative entity, meaning that it didn't come from a created being, we have no scientific way of going from non-life with those amino acids not existing to all of a sudden they do. There is no natural process that will produce certain amino acids that are necessary for life. So therefore, those who say, I believe in science, take it on faith that, well, we have no idea how it could exist, but we're trusting that it does, even though it doesn't make sense. Do you know what that sounds like? That sounds like faith. Now, there's a whole lot more. The whole of the scientific order says that the further down, the further in, the smaller that you get, the more simple the world gets. Were you aware of that? That's a scientific principle. And so we found that for a number of years as we discovered more and more powerful microscopes, going all the way down to electron microscopes. And we looked deeper in. And so we saw that there were molecules and atoms, and within atoms there were protons and electrons and all this stuff. And then we get all the way down to quarks with it. There's all this stuff, right? And so the smaller you got, the more simple everything was supposed to get. And then do you know what happened as we dug deeper? That funnel started going back out, and everything started getting more and more complex again. And we find that at these deep, deep levels, there's no way for these things to exist outside of some form of design. That's the only answer we have. Now, if you don't believe in a designer, you say, well, I know it looks like it was designed, but that's just because there's science that we don't understand yet. You know what that sounds like to me? It sounds like faith. And over and over and over, as we dig deeper into science, we are learning how incredibly fine-tuned, just dialed in the world is. Not just the world, but the cosmos, the whole of the universe. Do you know how narrow it is? I don't know the exact number. Steve probably does, because his brain is filled with 4 billion facts that I couldn't even forget, okay? That's just how his brain works. But we are existing within this Goldilocks zone, that's what it's called, where the Earth can exist, where it is far enough from the sun that we don't burn up, but close enough so that we stay warm, and that it is in relation to other astronomical bodies, so that our orbit doesn't fly off the handle, and all these things. It is so minute, exactly where the Earth needs to be placed in order for life to exist. It's almost like someone scripted the whole thing out. Or we can say, no, it is random happenstance. I read an article where it talked about the probability of Earth existing within this Goldilocks zone. And what they said was the probability, the statistics of it, that it was so infinitesimally small that it would happen by random occurrence, that it was what was called statistically impossible, meaning it was so small that because it got this infinite regression, it would get so small that statistically it was impossible. It could not happen. And yet we'll believe, if we don't want to acknowledge the existence of a designer, that, well, we don't know how it happened, but we're trusting that science proves it. Do you know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like faith. So I would suggest that all of us have faith. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying, well, those who believe in science have faith, so that's inferior, and our faith is... No, it's both faith. And it's both faith based on evidence. And one of the evidences we looked at last week was the idea that, again, there was existence, therefore, and existence demands a designer. Now we're looking at the fact that because there's design, that means something. So let's get to step 2. This designer points to a design, and therefore, it tells us about the designer that he is purposeful and intelligent. The fact that a designer exists points to the fact that there is a purposed design. There is reason behind it. There's an end in mind. And then we get to this final idea that any legitimate design, a real design, something that truly was designed, reveals that designer's purpose and character, right? We know, not always fully, but we can begin to discern when you make something what the designer's purpose in that was. How many of you have ever driven or driven in a car? A few of you. Some of you are liars or unconscious. It's one of the two. But the fact of the matter is, all of us have some experience with a car. And that car was clearly made. It was designed. What do we know by the very fact of the fact that it exists and what we see that it does? What does that tell us about the designer of the car? They had intelligence, depending on the car. If it's a Tesla, okay, yeah, I'm sorry I said that. Now, it tells us that there's intelligence, but it tells us other things. This designer wanted people to go from one place to another. They wanted to facilitate some level of transportation. They also wanted something out of it. Now, in today's culture, that means they produced this, they designed it, and they wanted money in return. There's things that we can know about that. But the fact that there is a design tells us that there is a reason behind it, because a design is not accidental. And so very, very often, we can learn something about the designer simply by the fact that the design exists. Now, it can't tell us everything, because that car, it could be used for a variety of things. So if I started driving down the road and running over every cow that I saw on the side of the road, was that what the car was designed for? No, you can use it for that, but that wasn't what the designer intended. But I can find out if the design points to the designer, and what the design is tells us something about him. One of the things that we can do is ask, if the designer's available, why did you make that? So if I'm taking my Cybertruck down the road and running over cows, we could, in theory, tweet Elon and go, did you design your Cybertruck to be an instrument of mass cow murder? And he could tweet back to us, right? He could let us know. He could reveal, or he could just have put out something saying, these Cybertrucks are not made for the decimation of bovine creatures. Like, that's something that could have been put out there. The designer can give us insight to the design. And that next week is some of what we're going to look at specifically, that the designer gives us insight to the purpose and the workings of the design. But right now, this teleological one says that what we can do is deduce from creation, from the evidence, that there is a design and therefore a designer, and from both, we can understand that there is purpose. And that's something that I think across the human condition, we can all lean into. The fact that we all desire purpose. We desire meaning. And I know that because anytime something hard happens, do you know what almost always our very first question is? It's 3 letters long. Why? Why? And oftentimes, if you're at all maybe a follower of Jesus or even just open to spiritual things, you'll say, why, God? Why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to my spouse? Why is this happening to my kids? And kind of similar to that, but going to the same basic premise is the question how, because we phrase it like this: God, how could you? Now, on one level, we know the how. On one level, he's God, he's powerful, he has ability. That's why we're asking the question, but it's, I can't believe that you would, because I don't understand why. Purpose and meaning is one of the most fundamental human questions that we ask. And interestingly enough, we tend to ask it most viscerally, most gut-level-y, when things aren't going well. Now, sometimes we'll ask it when things are going well, good, and that's a wonderful thing. We should lean into that actually more. But it's so often that the tough spots of life take us to the place of asking why. And I want to suggest that even in the dark spaces, that we can have purpose. And the fact that we can have purpose, the fact that we seek purpose, points back to the design and the designer. That on and on, we have this evidence because of how the world is ordered, because of what that order leads to, that there is one behind it all. And again, on a very 10-mile view, way up looking down, just like the cosmological argument last week, the teleological argument doesn't necessarily prove the God of our Bibles. What it does do is say, there is a God, there is a designer out there who has purpose. The Bible lines up with that, affirms it. The Bible takes us further, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to look into a little bit of what the Bible says about purpose and God's existence and his creative energies. That's what we're going to do this morning. Yes, we've looked at this teleological argument, and I believe that the purpose that we see throughout creation does point to the fact that there is both a designer and a design. And we said that our umbrella is that because God designed all things, then all life has purpose. I think that the teleological argument is summed up there. Because we see that there is design, there is fine-tuning, there is just complete order and intelligence and rational intentionality to all of what we see in life from all scientific endeavors, that there is purpose behind it. And we're discovering even more and more purpose. Do you know, for a long time, we said the appendix was stupid. right? That thing's there, hack it out. Now, sure, if you have appendicitis, there's some stuff you got to do because the body is broken. But now we've discovered that the appendix actually does serve a function, that it creates microbiomes in the body and what it does for the right kind of bacteria that's supposed to be in there, as well as certain levels of digestion and stuff, that it still does serve a function. You can exist without it, but it actually does do something. We always say, no, it doesn't. You can just cut it out. The more we dig in, the more we learn that all of what we are is designed, not just us, but the whole of the universe. And so because God designed it, that tells us that forces the conclusion that there's a purpose behind it. Design is not accidental. And therefore, I'm going to suggest that God's design itself proclaims his plan. The very fingerprints that he's put across creation declares to us all what his plan for us is. Now, we're going to be going to the Psalms. We're going to go to a couple different places, but where we're going to start is here in Psalm 19. Some of you might have thought I'd be going there. This is a fairly well-known passage if you do kind of church circle-y stuff. And in Psalm 19, we're going to look at the first 4 verses, or at least up through the first part of verse 4. So let's just kind of read this. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There's no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes throughout all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Let's step back and let's dig through a few of these phrases. First of all, the heavens, and the way the Bible uses this is it can be the idea of sky, or it can be the idea of the upward realms, space beyond, even into spiritual realms. And this seems, because it says sky for the second part, this is probably what the psalmist had in mind. The whole of the cosmic order, it says, declare what? The glory of God, the fame, the majesty, the renown of God. The whole of the universe declares, the created order declares, and then even the things that we see here, the things closer by, the sky above, proclaim his handiwork, that which he does. The heavens declare the character, the glory of God. The skies declare what he has done, both who he is and what he does. That's what creation declares. That's what the design proclaims, who he is and what he does. It goes on to say that day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge, what God declares and what the content of what he says. There is no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Then look here, that voice, the voice of God speaking through these things day and night, their voice goes throughout all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Voice throughout all the earth, words to the end of the world, that all throughout creation, the voice of God declares. And then it's not just that it can be heard, the evidence, the very content of that speech, the words themselves, are all throughout this world. Where's the end of the world? Anybody know? It's a trick question because we live in a sphere. There is no end. It's just multiple circles. So it's a way of saying, that's a little cheeky way of saying, there is no end to the world. It is everywhere. That's what this phrase is saying, that the content of God's message, it is everywhere. You can see it anywhere you go. You can't get away from it. The design declares it. And the emphasis here in Psalm 19, it's not merely on the beauty of creation, that, oh yes, creation's a beautiful thing, but it's about revelation. Creation itself reveals who God is and what he wants from us. Now, not completely. We've said a few times that there are multiple books of God's revealing to us. There is the created world, or what we call general revelation, and then there is the written word, our Bible. Now, the created world declares a lot. It can't declare everything. It can't get to some of the specifics. That's why God has revealed himself to us in his word. But the book of creation, as it were, reveals who God is and the heart of his message of who he is. And this teleological argument asks this question: why does the universe appear designed and calibrated for order, complexity, beauty, and life itself? That's what this philosophical question asks. What the creation declares is that God is who he is. He is good. He is great. He is gracious. He is glorious. He's loving. He's compassionate. He's all these things. Creation is declaring it, and that he wants good for us. We see how the earth provides. We see how the earth teems with life, and that we're invited into that. The universe is built for a purpose, and it's declaring that that purpose comes from its designer. This word for declare, it's a very forceful kind of Hebrew word. It's not like, hey, well, the word is safar, but it's not like, well, if you were standing close enough, you might be able to overhear. It's not the idea of a casual conversation. It's a very declarative statement. It's a very word. It's a word that is like shouting from the mountaintops, from one mountaintop to the other to be heard. That's the force of this word, that it is not this quiet, hidden knowledge that you have to look for, but that creation itself is shouting out. And you all know what that's like, right? And sometimes it takes you by surprise. For instance, if I would ask you, what does gospel mean, church? You would say, good news, right? And just that little bit of extra volume there. I know some of you people I'm related to turn down their hearing aids while I'm getting ready to do it. That's why I give you a little build-up so you can turn them down if you need to. Some of you kind of jerk up, right? Like, yes, I was paying attention. I was not unconscious, right? There's purpose behind this. Even with me, there's purpose behind everything, folks. But this declaring is something that captures attention. And so if you're going to not adhere to, if you're not going to listen to the message, it is a willful, intentional response. It's not one where you get to go, oh, I didn't hear you. Trust me, I know what that's like. I love my kids to death. And I'll say, I'm not talking about my oldest one right now because he's in the room. That would be mean. I'll talk about my younger ones. And, they like these things called screens, right? And they think we are the meanest parents in the world. I mean, you can poll them because we have limits on how much screens that they can have. It's smaller during the week, bigger during the week. I mean, there's rules to this, and we're so mean. But we'll do something like I'll go and I'll pretend that Gwen here is, I'll just use your name, okay? So I'm not picking on any one of my kids. So Gwen, it's time to turn your screens off. Gwen, it's time to turn your screen off. Gwen, turn your screen off. What? No, you heard me. You didn't want to do what I said. You didn't want the message that I was proclaiming, so you insisted you couldn't hear me. My kids do this, and they think they're fooling me. They are not. Okay? But sometimes we do this to God. Whether he's declaring to us through creation or declaring to us through his word, we act as though we cannot hear him. But God's design, it proclaims his plan. We can hear it, we can know it, and if we don't follow it, it is a choice. Now, I'm making it very simple, and I recognize that life has nuance. I recognize that different things make following that plan difficult for a variety of reasons. So I'm not discounting any of that, but you have to get down to the lowest possible level here. The foundation of it is, in the end, we do hear God proclaiming his plan, and we make a decision what we're going to do with it. But I'm also going to suggest that God's design proves our purpose. That when we look at design, it shows off why we're here. We're going to look at another fairly famous passage. We're going to go to Romans chapter 1. As always, I do encourage you, if you've got your Bibles, flip there with me. We're going to move fairly quickly through these. But what we're going to read in Romans chapter 1, we're going to start in verse 18. Now, Romans chapter 1 includes some very strong words for a lot of things, and one of those is a sexual ethos. Well, we're not going to get to that section of Romans chapter 1 today. We're going to look at how it kind of deals with creation existing and the fact that there is kind of sin and brokenness in this world. And that's where we kind of get into the conversation here of Romans 1, starting in verse 18. It says, the wrath of God, God's judgment against stuff, is revealed from heaven against ungodliness and unrighteousness. And not just some, but all. So, where is the wrath of God revealed? What's it revealed, first of all, against? Two things. Thank you. There we go. We got a very confident response. These are the easy ones. It's nice and bright and highlighted on your screens. But where is it revealed from? This is the idea of what the heavens are declaring. That God's wrath stands against ungodliness and unrighteousness. And understand that how unrighteousness is used in the Bible is used really to talk about the idea of, well, just looking at righteousness, right relationships, both between people and between people and God. That is the heart of unrighteousness, that are you interacting in the right way with other people and with God? So therefore, the opposite of that, the converse, the unrighteousness, is God's wrath is revealed against not operating in the right way with other people and with God. That's what heaven declares the wrath of God is against. And it's of men. And again, just making sure you understand, this doesn't mean, ladies, that you're good, that you can be as unrighteous or ungodly as you want. This is saying of humanity, of all of created people. It says, who by their unrighteousness do something. They suppress the truth. This is very important. We see it in this passage. It's kind of affirmed as we're going to keep going. It's not that we don't know what God wants us to do. It's not that we don't know God's purpose for us, in at least a very general sense. It's that we know and suppress, meaning we say, I don't want to do that. And we'll often not go to the point of say, I don't want to do that. We'll use phrases like, I can't do that. So we would get specific. I've heard this one a lot. Who does the Bible say we're supposed to forgive? Everyone. And I'll say that I have sat with people that really do love Jesus, love other people, but they've been hurt. They've been hurt in some mighty ways. And they will, in the same breath, say, I love Jesus, and I'm so grateful that he's forgiven me, and say, but I can't forgive this person. Again, I'm not discounting the pain. I'm not discounting that people can be horribly cruel and that situations can be beyond unbearable. But if we truly understand forgiveness, if we truly listen to the voice of God declaring to us, then we can say, I can forgive because God calls me to. And I promise you, with everything that I have within me, God will not call you to, God will not command you to do anything that you cannot do. He won't do that. Everything God calls you to, everything God commands you to do, you can do. Doesn't mean it will be easy. Doesn't mean it will be fun. It also doesn't mean that everything will not be fun and everything will be hard, by no stretch of the imagination. But that thing that you think is impossible, the Bible declares that it is not, if God has called you to it. We, unfortunately, will often suppress that truth. And why? Well, verse 19 kind of explains it. It says, for what can be known about God is plain to them. The basics, who God is, because God has shown it to him. He's declared it. He's demonstrated it. He's proved our purpose in the design that he's given us. And we see this in verse 20. For his invisible attributes, the core of who he is, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived. The Bible declares that everyone can see his fingerprints all over creation. And he says this ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made and the design itself. And the result is that we're without excuse. We don't get to say, I didn't know. Again, if you have children, and maybe if you don't, maybe you can remember back to when you were a child and you did the same thing. Your kid will do something that is, shall we say, clearly wrong. Just not a good idea. You, in your less gracious moments, might even be tempted to say, that was stupid, right? And your kid will look you dead in the eyes and go, I didn't know. I didn't know it was wrong. I thought it was okay to throw a shovel at my brother. Why would you never told me I couldn't, right? That child is suppressing the truth that they clearly knew that throwing a shovel at a child, and I really did just make that up. I'm not picking on my kids. I made that up. None of my children have tried, as far as I know, have not tried to murder one another. But they will do things that are, any kid, where you knew that was wrong. You can't act like you did. That's what God is saying. In the grand scheme, we do know and we suppress. The fact that God exists is declared by creation. And the fact that we have purpose and a purpose to follow what he has designed for us is clearly proved by the design itself. Our purpose is proved by God's design. Now let's keep going. Let's finish up here in Romans. It says, for although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. Honor comes along the lines of reflecting worship towards someone or something, saying you are worthy because of who you are. Giving thanks carries the idea, because of what you've done, I will show gratitude. So both for who God is and for what he's done, humanity chose to reject him. And we are tempted to reject him, even if not in all things, in some very functional, powerful ways. And it says, but they became futile. And understand that this warning is not written exclusively to those outside the faith who are rejecting God. This is written to us as well, saying, but for the grace of God go we, that we too can do these very same things. So we could read it, but we become futile in our thinking, and our foolish hearts are darkened. This could be how it is stated, because we'll claim to be wise and become fools. But look at this. What does it say? It says futile in your thinking, as well as foolish hearts were darkened. Both in what's going on up here and what's going on down here. It's Paul's way here writing to these Roman Christians in the first century of saying, with everything you got, you're suppressing the truth and you're doing something pretty silly. And what is it? In claiming to be wise, we become fools by exchanging the glory of the immortal God for images resembling all this stuff. Men, birds, animals, and creeping things. It is the picture of idolatry. You see, what we'll do is we'll exchange me for him. That is wildly evident in our American experience. It's not exclusive, but we're just like very blatant. I can't pick on Martin. He's not here at the moment, but he loves to poke at me for one of my pet peeves. It has something to do with truth. Do you remember what that is? I've mentioned this before. That phrase, nails on a chalkboard, because we don't have personal truth. We don't. We have personal stories. We have personal perspectives. We have personal opinions. Absolutely. But there is truth. There is true truth. It is out there. It is right here. Truth is true because it's true. Now, we'll know this truth and we'll go, I want X, Y, or Z. Even though I know this to be true, I'm going to choose something else. And usually it's because it serves me. What God shows in his design is that he is an others-centered being. He is about other people. He created a world that he didn't have to create for the good of the world that he would create. Even though this creation rejected him, he has gone through every possible extent to bring restoration, healing, and good back to the broken creation. with the promise at the end of all things, everything will be restored to its former glory. This is a God who is about others, who serves others, and he calls us to do the same, and yet we will so quickly exchange that to get what I want. That's too hard for me. I'm going to do it this way. That's not going to work for me. I'm going to go this direction. We will talk so frequently about what is good and right for me, and we'll do it at the expense of others. Even if it's not actively like harming or injuring, sometimes it is, and that is evil. But even if it's just, well, I will not give the good that I have to others because I have to keep enough for me. Now, you've heard me in other messages say that, hey, we are called to honor the image of God in every human being. Have you guys heard me say that? Uh-oh. Okay, consciousness check. Is everyone awake? Because I literally did an entire message series and have repeated it about 500 times since, that all of us bear the image of God, and the image of God in every human being needs to be cherished, valued, respected, and uplifted. Okay? Full stop. And in that includes the image of God that is in you. So yes, you need to honor the image of God in you. But that can't be at the expense of the image of God in others. And that includes withholding good that you could offer because you don't want to, or it's hard, or those kind of things. God has called us to that kind of being other-centered, and we exchange that truth for the lie of that doesn't serve me, so I'll say no. If we look at it, God's design proves what our purpose is supposed to be. But here's the last one, what the result of this should all be. I would suggest that God's design should prompt our praise. It should push us into praise. We're going to look at Psalm 8. So if you still had your finger in Psalm 19, or you were lazy and didn't flip to Romans 1, you can flip just a couple chapters back and go to Psalm 8. You can read the whole thing, but we're going to start here in verse 3. And here's what the psalmist declares. When I look at the heavens, there that is again, the whole of the cosmos, the work of your fingers, what you have wrought, O God of creation, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, considering all of this glory, what is man? But he doesn't just leave it at that. He's not just saying, who am I, worm that I am? He says, what is man that you are mindful of him? And the Son of Man, that you care for him. You think about humanity. You care for humanity. You who created all of this, all these great wonders, you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and have crowned him with glory and honor. This is what God is declaring about you who bear the image of God. God is mindful of you. God cares for you. He cares about you, and he has crowned you with glory and honor as one who bears and carries his image and likeness. The psalmist declares that these are truths, these are promises to you as one who bears the image of God. He says, you have given him dominion over the works of your hands. This is like someone who has crafted a masterpiece, a incredibly valuable sculpture. And it would be like if this were my sculpture, right? I spent years, all of my resources, everything I have is poured into this. This is good and right. And I go, hey kid, take care of that. Nice catch. See, I proved he was awake. But I took that thing that was most precious and I totally entrusted it to my son to catch it and care for it, right? Now note, I didn't throw my computer at him. But God entrusts dominion over everything into our hands. He knows we're going to mess up, but he says, I'm giving you this dominion anyway. I will walk with you. We're going to have to correct along the way, but I am entrusting that to you. This is what God has done with us. He says, you have put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, also the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, the fish of the sea, whatever passes along the paths of the sea. This is what God has given us dominion over. This is what God is calling us to, this grand, amazing purpose. He has entrusted us, his creation, with all of creation. He has crowned us with glory and honor. So what should our response be? Well, if you read the beginning of Psalm 8, you would see it ends in here in verse 9, it culminates in a very similar refrain where he says, "O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth." The result of recognizing who God is and all his creative brilliance and genius and the displays of his majesty and work, to the fact that he loves and cares for us, that he crowns us with this honor and this glory, that he entrusts all of creation to our care. Our response to that should be one of worship. God's design should prompt our praise. Now we're going to go back to the beginning, because I believe, again, that because God designed all things, therefore all life has purpose. In the difficult times and in the good times. In the lean times and in the rich times. In the rich times, it's easy to accept that God has purpose for us, even if we don't take the time to recognize it. In the difficult times, it can be much harder to see because we are creatures of experience. It's very easy to think that what I'm feeling right here, right now, is as it always has been, is as it will ever be. And it's hard to look beyond that. We're time-bound things. We're made, we have beginnings, we have end. But what God has promised us is that he is with us here and now, and that he has promised that he, as the good king, the good judge, the loving, good father, will set everything right, whether today, tomorrow, or at the end of all things. And that's hard to think. We can't think of we can't conceptualize eternity, because we can only experience however much of life we have. I have a shirt that says, "I can't act my age. I've never been this old before." Right? That's true. We only can really experientially understand however long we've been alive, which is why younger people tend to do dumber things, right? They have had less experience of life. That's not necessarily a slam, it's just truth. You get to be 50, 60, 70, 80, and you look back and go, man, I've done a whole bunch of dumb things. I won't do those. Well, hopefully you've gotten there. I question, occasional, why are you pointing at your grandparents? Son, my goodness. But we are time-bound. God is talking about all of eternity. And let me just encourage you in this way. It's harder to trust that God will come through in the end if you're trying to do it alone. If you're trying to go it alone and you're not surrounding yourself with others who are also striving ahead to look to eternity. Because that is something that's inside each of us. Ecclesiastes tells us that God has placed eternity into the hearts of humanity. That all of us were designed with this yearning for eternity, but we can only understand this much of it, because that's how much we've lived. God's design proclaims his plan. It also proves our purpose, and hopefully it will prompt our praise. I'm going to suggest we do something with this. I have two. They're kind of general, like they were last week, but I want to suggest these, first of all, to follow the evidence. We spent last week and this week looking at classic arguments that prove the existence of a designer, of a creator. Follow that evidence. Walk down that path. If you have not chosen to follow after Jesus, and next week we're going to zero in on why I truly believe that Jesus is the answer to the identity of the creator and the designer. But if you haven't made that decision to follow him yet, follow the evidence. Be willing to ask yourself, is this reasonable to believe that there is a creator, to believe that there is a designer, and to believe that there is purpose in this design? I'm going to ask you to follow that evidence. I'm also going to ask you to respond with wonder. And this is more for those of you who have made that decision to follow Jesus. For those of you who said, yes, I'm trusting in Jesus, don't let that be just a historical thing you've done. Let it be a guidepost for the rest of your life to where you're heading. The good news, the gospel, is not like the secret key that unlocks heaven and then you hang it up on the hook and you go, well, good thing I got in, I'm done. The gospel should be something that unleashes praise for all of your life. Not just when you get together up here or on a Sunday and you have people leading you in song. That is one way of responding with wonder, but also with all of your life. The decisions you make this afternoon, the decisions you make tomorrow morning throughout the week, with how you'll treat your cashier when you're buying your groceries, or the person that cuts you off on the street, or your neighbor who just does that annoying thing, or that individual who, has just been down on their luck and is struggling and maybe isn't sure how they're going to pay their rent or their electric or put food on the table for their kids, or insert hard thing here. How will you respond with wonder for who God is and how you treat those that he loves? I'm asking you to do something. But I've also been asking you to do a particular something. It's a particular something that started last week with this image up on the screen. Do you remember what it was? Because there's going to be some words that come up on here. It's a verse. It's the verse of 1 Peter 3:15. And I do believe that we have a small gift card available at the welcome desk for the first person in here today that can recite the verse from memory. Do we have any takers? Has anyone done their homework? You've already had 2 full weeks to learn one sentence. Has anyone done it? Okay. If you have kids downstairs, I'm going to mock you after we're done here, because they're learning verses every week, basically. All right? Well, what we're going to do, that incentive. It's what I did with youth ministry in my younger years. I'll continue to do with adults. I will bribe you into learning God's word. It's that valuable. I'm asking you to learn a single verse. This is 1 Peter 3:15. And you can cheat. It's on the back of your guides. Some of you were looking at that while I asked if you could memorize it, and I thank you for your integrity and not just reading it off and getting your free gift card. That was a classy move. But you can look there, you can look up on your screen. Please, as you can, read this with me. In your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. Now remember, those last 3 words are so super important. Do it with gentleness and respect. If you're being a butthead while trying to talk about Jesus or things of the faith, you're doing it wrong. That's not how the Bible says to do it. Gentleness and respect.